Okay, so yeah, thank you for joining this call. We traditionally do some collaborative review sessions on some bigger changes that we want to get feedback from reviewers and try to get things moving faster on reviews. So today we are joined by some SAP folks, especially Kiran and Maurice, and Kiran will talk us through the changes for share backups. So yeah, Kiran, first yours.
Okay. Let me see. I'm not able to share my screen.
Recording progress.
Maybe we need permissions, Felipe.
Yeah, right.
Sorry. How can I give this permission?
No. I think I need permission in my system itself.
Permission for sharing the screen, you mean?
Yep.
For the Zoom app, I believe.
From my sharing options, it says who can share. It's marked as all participants. Who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? Just me, host, but I add as all. And how many participants can share at the same time? One person. So yeah. From my view, I think you should have the access for sure.
If you want to, I can do the screen sharing. Oh, I think Kiran left. Yep.
Okay, I think now it works.
Yep, it's working now.
Yeah, so basically, I believe this call is about going through this pull request, as it is kind of taking quite a long time to review. So how do you want me to walk through? Because I think the initial part is kind of it's basically a generic implementation which we need to do in case we introduce new API version. So basically both of the changes are related to the API version. And then there are changes related to the quota, 2 quotas for the backup. One is number of backups and another is the size of the backups, like backup gigabytes. This is again the implementation within API layer for routing the backup related calls. This is the entry file, I believe, for the share backup, and it has these functions implemented, API calls, list, show, create, and delete and restore. So there is no, I think there is update, but it basically just update the metadata, or at this stage, only the name and description. But the additional API that we have is restore, where backup is being restored into the original share. These This is the implementation with respect to quota limits. This is the new file. Yeah, so this is the output of the various command, the view part for the backup. So after multiple cycles of review, what we have right now is two status for the backup, creating and restoring, and one status for the error as a backup restoring error. The backup creating error is itself error, and creating and restoring are added as a part of transitional status. So what we are doing at the higher level is basically this is the file where the entry into the after API layer it lands into this file where the multiple function this API functions create, share, backup, delete, share, backup, restore, share, backup is being implemented. And if so, the initial part of this is checking and the validation, then making sure that it satisfies the quota requirements. And what we have done is basically have one option added in API of backup create, which is called as a driver option. And if it is being set to the specific driver, based on that, it will be considered as a backup created on the driver backend. Otherwise, it's the backup created using the Manila data service. So basically,
A quick question. So where is this backup ref coming from? Like the driver option, is that part of the user input or?
Yeah, it's part of user input.
Okay. So how would the user know what to use?
How would user know what they use? So if user doesn't specify anything as a driver option, it will go to the Manila data. And if they specify any specific driver options, then it will go to the share. Now inside the share, which backend it has to follow up is basically decided by the share APIs that is being implemented by the various driver backends.
I see. Okay. And so this option here is a Boolean, is it? Like true or false sort of a thing?
Yeah,
Or
right
is it?
now, right now it can be, it's not decided the driver option Boolean, but it should have some value. For example, like if I'll be implementing this NetApp driver, then I'll be saying backup ref driver option as a NetApp, and this value of NetApp is being looked into the entry point of the driver directory, and accordingly the actual NetApp backend will be invoked.
I see.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so this seems a little problematic to me because of the fact that we're breaking the backend abstractions here. Technically, assume this is on a cloud where you so far don't know as a end user anything about what backends are configured, right? In this case, you would need to know, or at least your administrator needs to tell you what you need to provide as a driver option here. And so, I mean, that sounds fine to me because I think even in a generic backup implementation, right, you would need to know exactly where you want to back up.
So
Whether this is
This is being done as a part because this reference implementation doesn't have any driver implemented as
Right.
today. All call into the driver backends are stubbed. The implementation that we have is in data layer, and that is the NFS implementation. So this driver option part is something we can decide as a next phase where we'll be implementing backend for particular driver. So either we can keep the abstraction the way it is now, or we can make suitable the way right now in the code, right, where you specify the driver option, or we can go with getting the driver option from the conf file configuration. So that is
Yeah,
also possible.
and trying to abstract that away from the end user in some way. I don't remember this on the spec. So did we have anything in the spec that could was this
No, I
called out in the
don't.
spec?
No, I don't think we have mentioned the detail of the driver
How we are going to,
implementation.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Okay. All right.
So
And
if we think that the Boolean would be the good strategy, then we can make this as a Boolean option, and then using the conf, whatever the driver backends are configured, we can invoke those the way it is now.
yeah, just a sec. Thinking. I don't know whether if you have multiple backup destinations, at that point, a Boolean would not be useful, right? Like technically, let's say even if you have a NetApp, but you might have multiple NetApps,
Right.
two
Right.
different NetApps. How do you know which one to use as a backup destination, sort of thing?
I think that is
Uh,
something will be implemented inside the NetApp driver itself.
okay, I mean, sure.
Right.
But if you have an NetApp and let's say a different vendor, how would
Right.
you
If you
know
have a
that?
NetApp and then SafeFF or something like this,
Yeah,
then yeah,
exactly.
probably this option as a Boolean doesn't make sense. As in how you are taking a backup, you can specify either you go with a NetApp or you go with other backend.
Mhm.
In that case, this makes sense to have the name of driver or the backend where you want to take a backup.
Yeah, let me think about this a little bit because I mean, I'm looking at other implementations, let's say the Cinder, for instance. Cinder has, I think, just one kind of a backup driver as well.
So Cinder has multiple backup drivers. I think it has even S3 and Swift.
Yeah. And how would you tell it which one to use?
I think they configure in the conf file. I had
In the
used
conf
Swift
file?
backend, so I do remember that this is something they configure in conf file.
I see. Okay. All right. We can move on from this point, but technically this is I mean maybe we can discuss this
Yeah,
directly on your code.
right. Yeah, so basically, and this topic, whether it's a data backup or the driver backup, it's kind of kept into the DB and then later referred in delete as well as restore. So if it is share, then the share RPC API will be invoked, otherwise the data RPC will be invoked. That is the higher level implementation in the share API .py file. So where I was initially, yeah. So this is the, or let's walk through, let's go through the code flow way. So let's assume that we are in a data layer. So it will basically land in data RPC, and then it will land into the data manager.py. So here are a couple of configuration options that are being introduced as a part of NFS backup. I think this is something I have kind of taken the reference from the migration implementation, the way it works, and the mount template, unmount template. So basically it has this template and the commands which will be later filled in as a part of code. This is the backup mount temporary location. Right now it is /temp, but like we can configure it whatever we want. So in case user want to take NFS backup but want to have some different temporary location instead of /tmp, this option can be used. So what I have done is, yeah, so basically this migration code, which was using this function of copy, share data, this function is restructured based on the parameters that it is passing. Because in case of migration, it was using the source share instance and the destination share instance, and then the connection information for the source share and the destination share. So all this information is filling into dictionary for as in info for the source and info for the destination, and then the function is invoked, this copy function. And this function, instead of having these different parameters, it is being changed to consider only two, source and destination. So what happens in case of backup is, during backup, there is a source share, but there is no destination share. And in case of restore, there is no source share and there is a destination share. However, in case of migration, there is both source share as well as destination share. So this function needs to be modified accordingly. For example, in case of backup, we know that this condition will be fulfilled. I mean, in case of migration, this condition will be fulfilled, and in case of backup also. But in case of restore, this condition will not be fulfilled and this else part will be fulfilled. Based on that, we take the share ID and find out the access rights and permissions associated with the share ID. So whatever the access reference that we have for the source, basically it's the same stuff that we have here. Like we take the access reference for the source and we assign the same to the destination. So this part is kept the same. The else part is being introduced for handling the restore scenario. This function also restructured because I see we were passing like multiple parameters to these functions. So I just made sure that we pass the parameters correctly. For example, so there was yeah, so these functions are, I mean, they're modified a little bit just to make sure that there will be a code consistency. Because what I observed that, yeah, so for example, here we are considering mouth point path first and then instance ID. On the other end, in this function, we are taking instance ID first and then mount path. So I just kind of restructured and make sure that the conditions now handle both scenarios, like the copy in both directions. So all this is being done inside this single function copy share data. And actual implementation with respect to backup is handled inside these three functions: create backup, restore backup, and I think only two functions, create and restore, because I don't think delete will be. Yeah, I think delete is also there. So what happens is, in case of create backup, it is working as similar as that of migration. In create backup, just make sure that everything is correct with respect to state and etc. And it invokes this _run backup. And this _run backup function gathers all the information with respect to source share, its mount path, the backup location that is being configured into the conf file, and it fills in all this information into the source and destination. As you see, with respect to backup, there is no destination share ID and share instance ID. And the condition is exactly reverse with respect to restore. But at the end, this function calls this copy share data similar as that of migration. And then it does the copy, and if there are any exception, and everything is being handled inside this function. So the delete backup. So let's go to the restore first. As I said, like the restore backup is similar as that of create in the reverse way, as in it triggers this underscore run restore, and it takes all this configuration and fills into the required field for source information and the destination information dictionaries. And in case of restore, there is no source share ID and share instance ID, and the backup is false. So this backup false is basically indicates that this thing is not taking this invocation is for the restore. On the other hand, in this case, you can see that the destination has backup set as a true. So it indicates that this is taking the backup. And all these conditions are being handled inside this copy share data or its internal functions inside the helper.
Okay, quick question here. So these look okay to me, but they're a little bit coarse. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think we had this back and forth during migration as well, where we start a migration and it could potentially take a long time, right? Like it's a data copy happening on a node that's mounting and copying data. So what we did over there was we started the migration and returned back so that we could use another method to check on the migration, where there's a thread that's always doing the copy, but maybe we check the status and treat it as an async operation, and that might actually be useful over here as well. And another thing we were able to do with that sort of a breakup is that we could sustain failures on the node that's doing the data copy. So for if you see,
right. So with respect to migration, I think it's migrating from one share server to another share server. So it takes the considerable time. But with respect to backup, it's the mount export locations, basically the export locations from two different things. The source share and the backup location are being mounted at some temporary share server that we provide in this access ref, or the share server that is being granted as an the source system where both can mount at a time, and then it just perform the copy, and this copy it runs into the separate thread. Because what I had observed, I mean, anyway it runs into the separate thread, because even this backup function, it just calls for the copy and then it goes for further processing. So the scenario that you are talking about in migration, where we have to do into the two steps where we start the migration and then we complete the migration, is something I believe it's can possibly not needed here, because here you are not changing from like from one share server to another share. You are basically mounting under the same system to location and performing copy within the same system.
Yeah, but what if you have like some sort of a failure that happens on the system itself? Let's say the node gets restarted, or maybe the service gets restarted. How do we deal with that? And I could extend that a little bit further, even into the driver implementation for this. Let's say you have an advantaged implementation. Maybe this is going to a NetApp. And in NetApp, you start the backup. Typically, you don't really wait over there. You would send an API call to the storage system and return back. And you want the caller to check on the status of that sort of a backup. Let's say NetApp implements this like some sort of a replication. I don't know, maybe there is a backup implementation out there, but let's say it's replication. So you would go create the replica and then you'd start the data sync, and you have nothing to do as a driver. You just have to wait, and you'd rather not do that in the in a thread that's going to get stuck doing that. So you just want to return control and have the caller ask you again and again, are you done? Are you done? Are you done? And that way, you can basically have like a you can, it's more scalable. You can take more actions in and stuff like that, and you don't have a thread waiting.
Yeah, but that implementation would be the part of driver itself, like how the driver API will be provided by the backend provider, and how their internal implementation works.
But you're
if it-
implementing the driver API here, right? If you go up to the backup driver implementation, it has backup start. I think backup create.
yeah, I
Backup
mean,
is,
right, it has the driver APIs.
yeah, those that I see up there. No, I think that's the RPC.
Yeah, right now they are stuck because right now it just says that
Right.
call the driver backup.
Yeah. So you have something like that. Let's say you have the create. The way that would work is, line 5082, the driver gets a call, and it would just wait until the backup is complete to return back control to the share manager. And so that is potentially a long
No, I think
period
this
of time.
call is asynchronous. Even I
Oh,
think
is it?
here, I mean, this call should be asynchronous because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Right now, we don't have any driver implementation, but whatever the driver implementation would be, should make this asynchronous because it will just internally invoke the backup and the backup backend, and the backend internally will decide how it has to take the backup, and backend will just return the status that kind of it's processing in parallel.
Okay. Then in that case, we're switching the share back to available though on 5095. We're assuming that the backup is done, right? At that point, and the backup is status is available on 5097. So technically, if it's asynchronous, you're not doing any of that, right? You shouldn't be.
Yeah, if it is asynchronous, that should not be done here. But this is basically
No, I'm talking about 5095 and 5097, the ones where you have a happy path.
yeah, right.
So I guess you're agreeing with me that this has to be asynchronous for drivers, but maybe the implementation needs to accommodate that. And so technically you would basically say creating backup, and it's still creating until the driver tells us it's ready. And to get that, you would need to have like a different call to check on a backup until it's ready. and you repeat that call on like a periodic timer.
Yeah. So how it will go with respect to driver is something need to be considered.
Yeah, I agree. So this, I mean, we unless there's some strong objection, we can take this on to the code review if you want.
Yeah, right. We can take this on the code review.
And the same thing I would think is applying for restore as well. I don't think restores are instantaneous either, even when
Right.
it's a backend. So you might have a similar thing over there, right? Nothing gets blocked over there. You're restoring to a brand new share, but that share might take a while to actually be available. And so you would start the restore, and then you would keep checking if the restore is done as far as the backend is concerned. And
right, it doesn't make sense to kind of keep checking inside the same function. Might be some periodic.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Similar to replica.
Similar to replication, similar to migration even. They both do the same thing.
Yeah, something like this. This needs to be considered when there will be a driver implementation.
Yeah, and I would think that you would want the same behavior to extend to this generic implementation that you're making. And the reason is because of the kind of node failures or anything that could happen, right? So you can look at the migration implementation. It's like that. It says migration start and then migration continue. And the continue path is basically gonna, you know, keep checking on that migration to occur to finish.
Even in the migration,
I
until
could be
unless there
wrong.
is.
Let me check. Sorry, I may be saying something that is not true in the code. It's been a while since I looked at that code path, but if I can find it, I'll link you to it.
So inside this migration start, it is basically performing the copy operation.
Yeah.
And then it goes into the migration completion call. Right, if there is any exception in this copy code path.
I see. Just a sec. Yeah, 1 sec.
And then it is, so basically we are in a one way doing the same stuff, like we are calling the copy and which is happening asynchronously, and if there is an exception, we are like here it is setting to copying error, and most probably we'll be also doing the same backup.
Yeah, I see how this is implemented.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
so technically over here, we're assuming that the thread is just going to continue copying its data. And since this is a multi-threaded process, you might start multiple copies at the same time. But the thread that's busy copying some data will just continue to copy its data. And when it's done, it'll just call migration complete on its own. Is it? No, it's just going to finish copying and update the status, I think, or not. See, so there is a copy.get progress on line 137, data copy get progress. Of the data manager. Okay, sorry, I'm looking at the code over here, so that's probably line numbers are not matching up. But if you go down after migration start, there is a data copy data copy cancel, and then data copy get progress. You should probably expand that thing. Yeah, that one. So the way this is implemented is for migration is we start the migration and we call data copy get progress. and we continue to check on the the copy progress.
Okay. But
So
migration
from this,
can be
the share
cancelled.
manager is not blocked basically at this point. So I think that's how it works. Or I need to refresh my memory on this.
This data copy get progress is basically might be the internal implementation of the API call that we make after migration start. We invoke migration get progress.
Okay, so you're saying it doesn't get invoked by any process
That's what I
automatically.
believe. I also need to check into the code if I have to go look
Okay.
into this.
All right. And so what happens then if this node fails?
You mean in the backup or in the migration?
In backup, let's say.
I believe the node fails, then this process that is running into the separate thread will trigger an exception. Basically, it will fail this. For example, even in case of backup, this copy share data will throw an exception, something similar to what we have in the backup. Not here, but here. So this, if this works fine, then it will update the share. But if it throws exception, we move the existing task into the copying error.
Yeah, but what if you kill the service altogether and bring it back? I think there is code handling this up top in the init method here. And it's setting it to data copy error. Is that okay for your use case as well for backup?
Yeah, the data copy error would be the fine. I mean, it will kind of make the backup in the error state.
So you need to also handle that backup being in error state. Right now, it only updates the state or task state of the share, but your backup is probably stuck creating at that point, right? Your backup table entry.
It will basically raise share data copy failed. And this shared data copy failed, it will move backup into error. Yeah, it will move backup into the error.
Yeah,
And
but you'll also
triggering
need to do this at the init method is what I'm getting at, because you imagine you're just killing the service and you're restarting the service and the backup was ongoing. You're not going to get an opportunity to catch an exception there. It might not be a graceful shutdown or something. So you would have to do this again at the init so that if we come back and we realize there was an ongoing backup, but we didn't complete it, we just set the backup to an error. And presumably we can say, we can even raise a end user message suggesting that they reattempt backup. All of this was not required for migration because migration is only limited to administrators. So that the user experience was not that big of a deal because an administrator has access to logs and they would probably debug what's going on. But in case of backup, we need to be a little more user friendly.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so the init host is basically the task state is in either of the busy state. It changes to the copying error. For example, it is
that
either
sounds fine.
in yeah, so it changes the share. What you are saying that in addition to share, we also need to check for available backups. into the system and see if any backup is in creating state.
Yeah.
And it belongs to the share which is in data copying error state. And
Exactly.
then change the state of backup to the error.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the quest of making things asynchronous, I think you'll also probably end up making some changes to this API here, the backup create, backup complete methods in the data manager. Maybe some of them are no ops, because in this case, when you start the backup, you can't really stop it. Or maybe you can't just make it asynchronous because this backup is actually happening in this data service. And so maybe the backup create will start the thread, and some other way to, and probably the backup continue is a no op for this case. But for drivers, that'll be useful for the advantage implementations.
You mean this function, data copy get progress?
No, not really. I mean,
If this is the generic function with respect to getting the progress of the data copy, then this is something we can invoke
even for
for
backup.
the backup as well. Like we can
Yeah.
have additional API to check the backup status. Because
Yeah.
right now what I have tested with the backup of 1 GB and 2 GB, which basically like kind of finished quite fast. But if you
Okay.
consider a huge data transfer, then this kind of function make sense.
Yeah, it does, I think. And so you would have a backup get progress sort of API as well that end users can invoke to get like how much time it
But
might possibly take.
but it is okay. See, what I'm saying is that with respect to migration, if this copy share data is successful, we mark the migration as a complete, right?
Mhm.
So this might also be the case with respect to backup. Like if the copy is successful, then we kind of consider the backup is been done, or backup is being finished.
Yeah.
That is the reason I'm kind of changing the status in backup to the available state. So what I'm saying is that the user don't need an API to get information of the backup progress. Because if it is successful, then the DB states are anyway available or active, or basically kind of working good condition. If there is any error with respect to copy, then exception will be caught and it will anyway kind of update the DB as a failure in the
Yeah.
backup.
I get that, but I meant like the reason we introduced that with migration was because, I mean, potentially this could be a couple of terabytes, and that could take like on a really slow node, maybe a couple of days to copy, right? And so that is why you wanted a way to check on what's going on, as opposed to like, yeah, it's in creating. We don't know how long it'll take, right? That would be the black box kind of thing. And
But
with the NetApp implementation for replication as well, sorry, migration as well, it was the same thing. We were able to go back to the backend and ask how much of the data copy was complete. So if backends are able to implement it, you have a way to present that information to the end user. It's useful.
okay.
It's but is it like, Is it hard in this case? It's not, right? It's the same implementation as migration. So you should be able to use the same data copy get
Right.
progress thing.
Right, that's correct. But what I'm thinking is that migration is actually a two-step process where you do the migration, where you do the copy, and in the second stage, where you invoke the API as a complete migration. You basically get the new share server. And even if you get like this API returns the new share server, but even if you return the new share server, in the state of all the shares on that server is kind of keep updating on the backend, and it takes the time. So this second stage where you get a new share server and all the shares belonging to the share server update their export location, etc., is not a case with the backup. Backup has only one stage, or the first stage of the migration, that is
Yeah.
copy.
True. So you're saying it's not, people don't have to be that, I mean, people can expect that this will take a long time, and at some point it's going to become available. So it's the visibility is not that big of a concern, is what you're saying.
Yeah, at least with respect to the NFS implementation. With respect to driver implementation, I'm not sure how it will kind of shape up, because we are kind of still investigating with respect to the driver implementation. So with the driver implementation, if it is being found out that it is taking like hours or something to have the actual backup, then in that case we can introduce the new API to check the progress. And that API will basically just get the information of the copy process. Like basically, this will internally invoke this function in case of the Manila data service, and in case of Manila driver service, it will talk to the backend to get the actual progress.
Okay. Yeah, my suggestion is to lead with that, but we can take that to the code review if you want. Like, it should not be that big a deal for us to introduce that API.
Okay,
but if
I
there
can
is,
introduce. Yeah, I can introduce that with the current PR.
yeah,
Assuming that we'll definitely need that in the driver, because anyway this will be a synchronous process.
yeah, exactly. And I'm
Okay.
also thinking, by the way, I mean, this is great, and I think people are dropping off because it's been this thing also. It's quite late in your day, so we shouldn't keep this
Yeah.
going. This is actually quite helpful to me, at least, to air out some of these things, to start the discussion on some big points here. I do want to tell you that there is another backup implementation that might be coming as well, and this we learned off at the Open Infra Summit a couple of weeks ago. And there are some notes, I think, that Carlos shared to the mailing list, and that might have, just a second, let me see if I can find you a link. I might have some more data about what that backup driver implementation really looks like.
Okay, backup driver. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically Cern that was looking at using a backup service that they have built, and they call it CBAC. Just a sec. And they, I think, have some public facing API that we can just look at to see how this plays with your current implementation, right? Sorry, that's the wrong link. This is the mail.
So do they need additional APIs apart from?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with the, backup start, backup continue, and restore start, restore continue kind of interface, right? Because I think, I mean, when you have a service like this, which is very similar to what NetApp would implement, for instance, or Dell EMC or some storage backend would also implement, you would want an asynchronous, approach to that. So
Mm-hmm.
here's like another link of a presentation that can show you a little bit more about what the backup service for Cern looks like. And I think they have some API documentation at the very bottom on slide 18. So they start, you can create a new backup and then you can get progress about that backup. And you can basically do restores in the same way.
Which slide?
Slide 18 of the last link that I sent you. Yeah, we can actually ask Cern to share a little bit more about this API if you want. All we see is this Swagger, top thing, but how it looks, maybe if we get some more details as to what the request response look like, we can check out what that API looks like. But another thing is,
at the higher level, it looks like it's like, so basically, see, this new backup is the create backup, and the second last from the bottom, new restore is create restore, and the other functions like get restore. So basically, they introduced restores, which I think should also be considered under the backups, not separate as a slash restores in API. But what I see additional is that they have snapshots and the mount. So not sure what is the use of slash backup slash mount. Maybe to get the information where backup is being mounted by the backend driver, so that end user can mount it again and then use that backup, something like this. But so the reference implementation in the NFS, we have to provide the mount part in the conf file. So this API is not needed for that, but might be needed for the driver implementation. Yeah.
So yeah, presume at some point somebody will submit a driver implementation for this, right? This it's called CBAC or something, and so the driver implementation would have a way to create a backup, but it's going to be async call, and then a way to get the backup to see whether the backup is complete or not, and a way to create a restore and do the same thing with restore, see whether the restore is complete or not, sort of a thing. So it's similar to everything we discussed, saying when you have an advantage implementation, this is how you would probably want to approach it, because you don't want the driver to just wait on anything.
So once backup is being created, maybe this, I mean, once we trigger the backup create, maybe the later call, like the get API request for the backup, can also go and check the status of backup with respect to the driver backend. For example, if the backup is in creating state, it will go and get the progress in terms of percentage, something like this. And if the backup is if the backup is not available or not in error state, it will go through the backend driver invocation. Otherwise, it just return the information that is available in the DB. Something like this can be done as well, instead of having a separate API to get the progress. I mean, the get API itself go and fetch the details.
Yeah, I like that. But the get API might, yeah, you would have something frequently updating that back into the database, like the data copy progress is such and such. Yeah, I actually prefer that over what we're doing with migrations. Right now, a migration call, a get progress call is a call, an RPC call, and we wait for the backend to do whatever it does and give us the give us the progress, and that is problematic because we're waiting on an RPC in the API. So I like that. I like what you're suggesting. I think
No,
that's a
but
good idea.
in my suggestion as well, if the backup is active, then we return from the DB. But if it's not active, then we have to go talk with the backend using
No,
the RPC.
I'm picturing you doing this doing this anyway, right? Like in the share
Right.
manager or the data manager, you will be polling
Right.
for the backup.
Right.
And while you're polling, you can just update the status into the database.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And so that way the database always has what's going on. And if the
Right.
user is asking, you're returning immediately because you know what's there in the database. And it also has like an update timestamp, so you know when it was last updated.
So instead of
So
RPC, you are saying some periodic function?
yeah, exactly.
To...
Because you have
Mhm.
the periodic function anyway to check on a backup that is started to see whether it's complete. And so you'll keep checking on it. And so as part of that, you take the progress, you save it in the database, and you're kind of ready to give that information to the end user.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I mean, it is a little bit of a different use case as well. Like we were discussing with migration at the beginning, like migration is an admin driven activity. And like you were noting, yes, it is a two-stage process. So the admin is actually waiting. And so they're probably polling for this migration again and again, checking if the migration is done with phase one so that they can implement phase two.
Right.
And so they're bound by some sort of timelines, etc. But in backup, as long as I know there's something happening and I'm gonna get some progress, I'm not that anxious, I suppose. There is no time expectation here. There should not be a time expectation. If it's stuck for forever, yes, I should probably talk to an administrator and figure out what's going on. But otherwise, I'm happy as long as I'm getting the progress saying, okay, this is getting backed up at the moment, and it's progressing fine. I at least that's my feeling, which might be contested. So that's why I kind of like what you're suggesting with the get progress thing. Not a different API, just part of the same thing. Show me my backup, and it'll give you whatever progress is noted.
Awesome. Yeah. Key points discussed. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Gautam, and thank you also for. Oh, I think Kiran dropped slightly. Yeah, that's why screen sharing stopped. Okay. Yeah. Let's try it again. Yeah, so there's one aspect that I would like to mention as well. Oh, there's Karen. Yeah, one other aspect I would like to mention is basically functional testing. I saw there's one patch opened for functional testing, and there is one scenario being tested, like create and delete a backup. But I think it would be important to test the other APIs as well in the functional tests. And I think, yes, it would be great if we could get that done, get the implementation for the functional tests going, so we can actually test more and have the test for it in the CI as soon as we get this feature merged.
Yeah, I mean, we can consider the functional test as a separate stuff. I mean, if we kind of hold the existing PR, then so it will take a lot of time, I believe actually I had mentioned in the comment itself the steps to test this stuff on the dev stack. I mean, I can go with the implementation of the functional test, but for not sure, like it will take another couple of months back and forth because I have other things as well. And
Yeah,
so-
covering the APIs at least would be great. I mean, there is of course like the functional tests that test the API, but there's also like scenario tests, and the test that you mentioned there, like in the how to test it with DevStack, it's useful, yes, but that would be what we call the scenario test, which will actually get the whole scenario and test it and like create the backup, copy the having it copy the data over, and then restoring the backup and ensuring that everything is there. So that would be like a scenario of a scenario test, honestly. Whereas for API testing is kind of a different scenario. Like it's more like the scenario you are testing already, but you have the positive tests for creating and deleting shared backups, but also there are like the other APIs that we need to take a look at. I also think it's important to have the scenario testing at the CI at some point, yes, but I think if we focus on the API testing side, it would not consume as much.
I think the API side things are already not the whole API side, but some tests related to the API side are already kind of added.
Yep, I looked into the code. We have the test for create and delete, but it would be nice to have other tests for like restore the new upcoming API that we're basically discussing, like the get progress. So I think it's important to test the APIs there.
Okay, but are we okay? So are we kind of confirm on the get progress? Because what I got from the recent discussion is that instead of having the get progress, we can report the progress as a part of get API call itself on the backup, and then the Manila will internally have some callback function or continuously loop function which keep updating the DB state for the backup. Am I received correctly, Gautam?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. That sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, thanks. I mean, I was trying to look for more examples of APIs we could cover with functional tests. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
And how is this run in the CI though? Like we are expecting to test always with the data service enabled, but that will mean that this is actually running against LVM or generic driver or something like that. Or are we are you adding like a dummy driver implementation, which should be actually absolutely nothing but some way to test the APIs themselves without doing like a backup really.
Okay, fine. I mean, in the dummy driver will basically just return true or return success, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
Nothing the actual copy. Okay.
So that you can do the API testing properly from Tempest.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so that's mostly what I had.
Okay, so with respect to current Manila implementation, two things that needs to be added is periodic callback and the dummy driver implementation. And then this get API call needs to be kind of, yeah, Nothing needs to be done into the Git API because the periodic callback will automatically update the DB state. And some functional test with respect to APIs into the Manila Tempestuous plugin. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Anything, anyone, any queries?
The only thing on the Python Manila client thing that I wanted this thing is we were not looking to add anything in the shell client.
Right. Okay.
I'm not going to stop you if that is but that's a lot of extra work that you didn't need to do, because we are actively trying to prevent anyone relying on this, right? Because OSC client is up to date and you are adding OSC commands as well.
Okay, fine. Anyway, that was added. I'll remove this as the next update or rebase.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, if anything from anyone, then we can wrap.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for staying late, and thanks for taking us through this code. It's very, very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Greg. It was really helpful. Yeah, and sorry for the delay in the meeting, but also for asking us to switch over to Zoom. Yeah.
Okay, thank you guys. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Yeah, bye.